Hello friends, KillerBee here. Spend any time following railroads, and undoubtedly you are familiar with the Belt Railway Company of Chicago, the Indiana Harbor Belt, Alton and Southern, Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis, Kansas City Terminal, and other terminal or switch roads. But what do they actually do? What is their purpose? Well, they have three main purposes. Oh, although the images I'm using may be a little dated, the principles they illustrate are unchanged. First, a little background. Railroads often refer to a large metropolitan area that they operate in as a terminal. So a large railroad may refer to its Chicago terminal operations, for instance. Unlike a switching district, which has formal boundaries, everybody can set the boundaries of their own terminal area. You also have these smaller railroads operating within the area, and they are often referred to as terminal railroads, as they operate within the terminal area. They may even use the word terminal in their corporate name. Sometimes they are also called a belt railroad, as they partially encircle the terminal like a belt. In fact, both of Chicago's large terminal railroads have the word belt in their name, the Indiana Harbor Belt and the Belt Railway Company of Chicago, who also has a belt as part of their emblem. Some had the word Union in their name, such as the former Peoria and Pekin Union. In the Pittsburgh area is simply the Union Railroad. And almost all had cool emblems. They are also called switch or switching railroads, as they receive a switch charge as opposed to a line haul for their efforts. Let's look at the first type of switching they perform. Serving as an intermediary, handling cars between railroads, is one function of these lines. In a large terminal like Chicago, you historically had rail lines coming into the terminal from all directions. Many had cars destined for the other roads, but did not always physically connect with each other. So, how were they to exchange cars? They could exchange cars through the switch roads, like the BRC or IHB. The BRC was the most aggressive at marketing themselves to serve this purpose. In fact, their clearing yard was named to highlight its intent to be a clearinghouse for Chicago rail traffic exchange. The pitch was, instead of every railroad running transfer jobs to every other railroad in the terminal, everybody should simply run all their interchange traffic into clearing, where all the traffic would be switched by the BRC, and transfer jobs operated back to the various yards. Think of a hub and spoke system instead of a spider web, with clearing in the middle as the hub. Or the TRRA yard, as their emblem shows. Railroads tight on yard capacity or lacking a yard also use the switch roads yards to terminate and originate their road trains. This speeds car movement because instead of, say, a transfer running from BRC's clearing yard to CSX bar yard, getting switched, and then the cars moving out of bar yard, the train, already blocked, moves out of clearing and bypasses processing at bar. The revenue the switch road derives is called an intermediate switch charge, as they are providing the function of an intermediate switch. There are two main ways this process is accomplished. One way is for the railroads to deliver and pull the cars from the switch roads, such as this 1995 shot of CNW delivering a train to the BRC at clearing. Usually the railroad delivering the cars to the intermediate switch road for furtherance beyond pays the intermediate switch charges. The other way is for the switch roads to go to the railroads, as we see here, the IHB snaking its way through Proviso Yard, delivering cars to the Union Pacific. The terminal roads also perform another type of switching, serving industries located on their lines. They are considered as being neutral carriers, as they assess the same switch charge to access their customers to everybody. If you are a rail-served industry located in a terminal on a line haul railroad, you might be a closed industry. That means your serving railroad, which is the railroad you are located on that switches you, does not publish a switch charge. Other railroads having a car destined to you must give your serving carrier a line haul. They may do this for competitive reasons, so that they don't get short-hauled on traffic from a competitive point. A switch carrier, however, will charge the same switch charge to everybody. They play no favorites and gladly take a car from anybody. The third function of a switch road is to be like a toll road. Railroads that need to run trains across the terminal often use the tracks of the switch roads. The switch roads will usually assess a per car charge against the railroad running the train. Here is a shot of a train from the BN at Galesburg, Illinois, for the CSX at Bar Yard, using the IHB. In the rear is an empty coal train that the CP is taking up the IHB for the UP at Proviso. The switch roads will also perform puller service, moving entire trains from one railroad to another across the terminal. Many of the terminal or switch roads are owned by the larger railroads. The Belt Railway Company of Chicago, called the Belt for short, is owned by North America's 6 major railroads. They have varying amount of votes based on how many of their predecessors were originally BRC owners. The Indiana Harbor Belt, called the Harbor for short, was owned 49% by the Milwaukee Road and 51% by the New York Central. This has morphed into 51% Conrail and 49% CPKC ownership today, with the Conrail control split. Norfolk Southern and CSX each control 2 directors on IHB's 7-person board, but they vote as a block. At one time, the Alton and Southern was owned by the Missouri Pacific and the Chicago Northwestern, which is reflected in the line's emblem. At one time, there were many more terminal railroads. The Detroit Terminal, the Toledo Terminal, the Wyandotte Terminal, and the Union Belt of Detroit come to mind from my early years. Many of these earlier terminal railroads got absorbed into the line haul roads or were abandoned. An interesting situation, well, to me at least, is CSX maintaining the separate corporate structure of the Baltimore and Ohio Chicago Terminal Railroad. Unlike the Toledo Terminal, which was absorbed into CSX in the late 1980s. The B&OCT was originally the terminal railroad in the Chicago Terminal for the Baltimore and Ohio, and operates Bar Yard, the main switching yard. Keeping this structure in place and not merging the B&OCT into CSX allowed them, at least in the past, to assess an intermediate switch charge on the cars delivered to CSX from other railroads in the Chicago Terminal that were handled by the B&OCT, such as cars delivered at Bar Yard. In the 1980s and 90s, both Burlington Northern and Wisconsin Central lost court cases trying to argue the B&OCT intermediate switch charges were improper. In order to show that the B&OCT was not just a paper railroad, but a separate operating entity, CSX took action such as keeping the terminal dispatcher in Chicago when the rest of their system-wide dispatching staff was moved to Jacksonville, Florida in the late 1980s, and also by having dedicated motive power. Well, I hope this gives you a better understanding of the role that the terminal or switching railroads perform. You may subscribe here or link to a sister video on switching. Thank you. Bye for now.